We are the Orphans of Ragnarökr. As Fenrisulfur the wolf approached, the goddess Freya banished our forefathers to this forgotten land, so they might escape the foretold destruction of Midgardr. That was 7 generations ago. Here, every day is a struggle to survive. The gods are dead, and we are outcasts in this harsh land called Jornheimer, Ironhome, and we are not its only prisoners. Hey everyone, thank you for stopping by my channel. My name's Aaron. I've decided that YouTube needs just one more person to record themselves playing solo RPGs. So I'm going to be running through a campaign of Ironsworn, a tabletop RPG of perilous quests by Sean Tompkin. And I will say that having done those 2 campaigns so far, and in both cases, my character has died horribly. Although in one they did get their goal, so it is definitely perilous. The Ironsworn itself is a narrative game designed to be played solo, although it can be played with cooperative players or a game master as well. And it's you can download it free. You can download the PDFs free. Like on drivethroughrpg.com and ironswornrpg.com or ironsworn.com. Uh, Sean is giving a lot of stuff away free for this game. He also has some other products out there. Delve, which is sort of an add-on to the game that focuses on, well, delving into mysterious sites. So, yeah, I've got that too. So I'll be doing some delving. We'll be doing some delving if you stay around and watch. Uh, but I will go ahead and head on over. We'll set up the game. We'll run through how to create the character and the campaign, and we'll see what happens. All right, here we are. I will be using a online app. It's a web-based app to keep track of the characters, the NPCs, um, and really all those things. This app right here, I'll put a link to it down in the description. It's free. It's very clean. It's nice. It's simple to use, and it's very well done. And it includes all the delve tables and oracles and stuff as well. I will also be using, because even though this is it's very nice, I prefer to use books. I love my books. So I will be using this is a printout. Basically, it has all the oracles and stuff for the game. And in this book, I've also put the oracles for Delve as well. 2 other things that I'll be using that are not from Ironsworn itself is I'll be using this universal NPC emulator, which is something you can get on drivethrough rpg.com. It's Une, UNE, and it basically just a little more in depth than the one that comes with the game with Ironsworn. If I decide I need it, because usually I don't need it, but every now and then, just to increase the tables, just to increase the range of possibilities, I like to use other things. And because of the campaign, which is whereas Ironsworn itself is set to be sort of a generic Iron Age grim fantasy, and it has a list of names for the different races and whatnot. This campaign, Jarnheimer, it posits that that the people in Jotunheim or Iron Lands, the Iron Lands, Iron Home, are Norse survivors of Ragnarok. So I've got a Ragnarökian, a Norse name generator. This is another thing that you can find on RPG.com. It's like 300 gender-friendly Viking names, I think is what it's called. Um, and it has different there that I like to use. I also use a web page. Let's see, I'll switch over to it here. Called fantasynamegenerators.com. It's great. It has a ton of these names, and under real, so fantasynamegenerators.com, and you select real names. They have a bunch of them. I use them for a Holy Roman Empire campaign that I've run and written for. Click on Viking names, and it'll come and get female names, get male names. So it's a very, very good site. I use it. I use it a lot. And finally, I do also use another book of random tables from dicegeek.com. They recently released one. It has like a bunch of their tables in there. So sometimes I will use those, but I prefer to use, even though most of the tables are built into this app, this online app, um, I prefer to do my own dice rolling. As such, the dice rolling here, even though I'll put the information onto the uh, onto the screen so you guys can see and follow along. I like to roll my dice, and there's Knut, our Viking, with a pretty small shield for a Viking, but he's going to be there. He's going to watching over the dice and making comments, probably when the dice rolls are very bad or very good. All right. So to set up a campaign, to run a campaign of Ironsworn, the first thing you do is create your character. All right. I've already done most of that because, like I said, this is not necessarily a how-to play, but I have set my stats, which are a stat. If you know a role-playing game, it's your statistics. Your edge is your missile weapons, your agility. Your heart is like your charisma, bravery, empathy. Iron is strength, toughness, weapon skill, melee weapon skill. Shadow is deception and stealth. And wits are your wits. How well you come back with those cool Viking one-liners. Okay. Uh, so that's basically what you start with for your stats. Um, Health, spirit, and supply. Those are all, I guess you can say, they're kind of like hit points for those things that are all needed to go on an adventure. Momentum is, those are things that you build up the momentum and you can use it in game to help you. I kind of think of it as one of those power meters on like a fighting game or a Japanese RPG where you do cool stuff and it slowly builds up, and then you get to the end and you can do your Hadouken and knock down some bad guys doing that. Um, Bonds are basically that. They're bonds. They describe um, close ties with people. Um, okay. Now I have done that. The other part that goes into making your characters what they call assets, and your assets are skills and abilities that come into play that help you during the game. And each character starts with 3 different assets. I have pictured Knut as being a son of a famous warrior. He himself, he's older. He's a grizzled veteran. So I picked veteran. And empowered, which the asset in terms of this game allows him to sojourn, which is basically you try to make friends and get supplies and resources, support from communities of various sorts. And he is son of Holger, who was a famous warrior who, like many famous warriors, died in battle, and he's a thane or a thing, which in Norse words is kind of like a knight. In Yarnhelm, because they don't have, or Yarnheimer, because they don't have the same feudal structure anymore, being kind of post-apocalyptic, it's really more of a honorary title, but it's a title of respect. And if people uh, accept and respect that he's a thane, then he's seen as being uh, a tough guy. He's seen as being a brave warrior. He's someone who's earned the respect through right of arms. And each one of these skills, these assets, will give him certain abilities. Like in the veteran, whenever you burn momentum to improve your results in combat, you envision your hard-worn fighting experience, and then you take one momentum, you get one momentum back, and then you add one when you make your next move. So basically, if you go, you burn your momentum, and then your next action is an attack, you get a bonus to that. You're empowered when you sojourn and you score a weak hit or a miss. You claim the right of hospitality based on your title or your lineage, your heritage, whatever it happens to be. In this case, it's because he's a recognized thane and he is son of Holger. And uh, somewhere in his background, Holger has a cool name, I think, like the oh yeah, Holger the Impending was his father's name because he was always getting ready to go on some kind of adventure. He was impending. He was always getting ready to do something. Um, Okay. And then his third asset is sighted. And when you face danger or gather information, both of those are moves, which are specific actions or mechanical tools to help the narrative go along. They're basically actions or things that you do. Face danger, gather information to identify or detect mystic forces, add one, and take momentum. So as you can see, gaining that momentum is important and it's helpful because like I said, it builds up and then you use it, and then when you use it, it gets you out of a tough spot sometimes. And I've always thought the idea of the warrior who can see things that other people can't see is kind of I guess the adept is cool. In the case of Knut's background, he went missing for a while, and no one really knows why. That's actually a campaign secret I've built in. He may discover it. He went missing for a while. It's believed he was captured by the Althar, or the elves, and was tortured. Uh, but since that time, he can see hidden things. The Norse mythology is full of the Vater, land spirits, little gnomes and tree spirits, dryads, everything. It and they exist, although not they're not everywhere. They do exist in Jarnheimer, just by way of the virtue of the world itself, that I've the magic level, I guess you would say, that I've decided to give it. Okay, so I've selected those assets. I selected the statistics, and the next thing that we're going to do is the world truths. Okay, now I'm going to just go over this and give a brief synopsis of what I selected for those world truths, because they're one, I don't want to get I don't want to get into a big expository dump, but this is part of making a campaign. The old world is, when you select the old world, you're deciding how the people came to the game world. And the defaults are usually has to do with some kind of cataclysm. What cataclysm chased them away from their homeland to go to the Ironlands? Iron is important to the Ironlands, and this is how you pick what it is, whether it's because there's a bunch of iron and it's an important resource, or because the people are iron because it's such a crappy place to live, or if there's magical iron pillars, right? The legacies talk about how the um, how the uh, who was there first. Was it were there humans before, or was it just elves or giants or whatever? And then everything else, communities, leaders, and these are just things that are set up as time goes on. I'm not going to go, like I said, and read a bunch of, yeah, I'm not going to go into a bunch of details, but I'm just going to just skim through what I had decided. Because I like to world build, so I've got a whole bunch of stuff that would just be boring for me to read on. Um, but in this setting, this campaign, the 7 generations ago, as is told by the people who are still here, 7 generations ago, the Yarnari, the people of Jarnheimer, were warriors fighting in the last battle of Ragnarok. Okay, and Freya took pity on them and banished those brave human warriors to Jarnheimer to get them from being destroyed, to keep them from being destroyed. Okay. As the forces of darkness were marching against the Aesir and the Vanir, the gods of Norse mythology, and Fenris was doing his stuff, and the Jotnar, the giants, and everyone were attacking. So she set them she saved them by banishing them to this land that very few knew about. But it is a land that others, unsavory types, have in the past been banished to. And so it's kind of hidden, and it saved the people. At least that's what the stories say. Um, the iron is basically it's Jotunheimer because it's gray and inhospitable and uncaring as iron. The weather's bleak, it rain and snow. Although, and there's a lot of iron. It's an iron age, and so they do know how to make some. The legacies, there are, like I said, other people and creatures have been banished here before. So there are uh, the various types of elves and gnomes and giants and trolls and humans. Most of the humans who was living here before are now Skrailinga. They're wild barbarians. They lost everything, but they still live, and they're not always helpful. The communities are generally small villages. There is one large city, large by their standards anyway, called Odinsborg, and it was the very first city that was set up. Most people know it, just because it is such a it's the starting port. It's where the survivors gathered and first set hold and expanded out from there. Most communities are led by. What you didn't see there was me having to stop my recording so I could go drop one of my children off somewhere, because I live in an international, interplanetary, intergalactic travel space hub and zoo. So at any given time, there will be dog barks and people screaming and kids running away. And all I have this one little corner of the whole house that's for poor old dad. Anyway, where were we? Oh yes, I was going through the different things. The leaders of most villages are, like I said, what they're called Godi, which were sort of like a mayor slash priest. The social classes are they sort of fell apart in the post Ragnarok apocalypse. So there are most Yanari are freemen, although some have sold themselves into indentured servitude to be kind of like thralls. And there is raiding and capturing, so there are some who are captives and thralls, slaves. In defense, the defense area, one of the world choices, there are not a lot of standing armies. Most defense is done um, by the militia, which are the common people taking up arms, the Leidengr, or militia, and among among those professionals, you'll see that some men are able to hire bodyguards, the huskaros, and those who have uh, made a name for themselves on the battlefield, being brave, being are things. And there's the Skaldmer, which are the shield maidens of renown. Uh, Thane no longer holds a fealty title. It used to be you are someone's Thane, but now it's, like I said, it's more of an honorific. The because it's a Viking Age and Iron Age uh, society technology level, there are, as far as the weapons go, they're very basic. They're Iron Age weapons. So you have the spear is far more common than any other weapon, and you have the axe, which is a weapon and a tool, and those things are very common because they are, even though there is iron at this age, it's pretty labor intensive to make anything. So a weapon that you can use a little bit of iron versus making a sword, which takes a lot more iron, is cheaper and more cost effective, and it's easier to uh, to create. Um, the most important type of defense are actually the Viking round shields. They're big round shields. They have a center boss made out of metal, um, made out of iron, and they are fairly disposable. And given that the rest of the armor, the full armor, the hauberk or the brinja, the byrnie of chain or small plates is very rare. They're expensive. A well-equipped warrior of the time will have a spear, a shield. He might have a pot helm of some sort if he's really fancy, or Spagan helm, what they call it, has the different panels on it. He might have the oculars that come down over his face, or a nasal that comes down, protects his face. But armor otherwise is going to be, if they have any at all, it's going to be hides or padded thick clothing. Uh, the sakes is a or sax is basically a big Bowie knife. It's easy to make. You make a bar of steel, sharpen one side of it, and then you clip it so that it comes to a point. And those, because they're shorter, they're easier to make, and you can stab with them. And you can have a long sakes, which is a longer short sword, or a regular sakes, which is, like I said, is a big knife. Um, and I guess it's maybe sax. I should probably look up how that's pronounced. I think I've heard it both ways. It probably depends on what language you're trying to emulate. Um, okay, so yeah, the most valuable weapons and armor are those that were brought from Midgard, because they were crafted by people that had greater skill and more resources, um, and were of very high quality. Oh, and of course they also had the sword, your typical Viking sword, which will kind of look something like this. All right, this is a Norman era sword, so it looks a little different. The cross is a little bigger than a typical Viking sword. And the Viking pommels were usually kind of lobed instead of being a solid piece, but it works kind of like this guy's. See if it'll focus. Well, not so much. But anyway, that's what a Viking sword would look like. And they have of course, their big, huge, great axes, which are cool. The spears also were, some of them had broad blades, what they called hewing spears, so they could actually whack into somebody as well. You could chop and slice as well as just thrusting. But the next level, or the next world attribute, is mysticism. And the Norse, the people of Jarheimr, they are Norse descendants, and they see the mystical in everything. Every rock and lake, tree has their own spirit, their own Veter that lives inside. Now, that is not exactly true. They don't all have, but those Hulden folk, the hidden people, do exist. There are there is magic, but it's very rare. A lot of people, wise women, uh, your cunning folk type people, they know herbalism, they know healing, things like that, but very few actually have uh, powers that can affect the real world in any meaningful way. Very few can actually divine with the runestones, but they exist and they can be very powerful people. Uh, the religion is very pragmatic. It's very agrarian. They basically follow the Norse gods, Odin, Thor, Freya, whatnot. Uh, but because Ragnarok has supposedly happened already, you're not really sure if those gods are even still alive, and there's a lot of people who have trouble with that their gods are dead. Or are they dead? No one knows. No one has been able to get back to Midgard to see. Um, but it is very pragmatic. You have, like I said, the Godi usually are responsible for making sacrifices. They use blot, which are like blood offerings of people sometimes, but usually animals, and they make sacrifices. But the religion is very, even though the Goti may lead the community, the religion is considered very personal. Every now and then you'll find a small shrine or temple, usually to the three uh, mostly worship gods. Uh, but it's very personal, and it's not very dogmatic. Basically, um, don't piss off the gods, right? Don't piss off the gods. Don't piss off the little people that live around us, all over the place. Don't piss them off. Do the sacrifices, make the offerings that you're supposed to do, and a lot of the offerings are personal. If someone's going to go out, they want to pray for um, a good harvest, or when they're going out to the middle of a battle, they may make personal sacrifices, and that's it's about it. It's basically about day-to-day living instead of lofty spiritual discussions. Um, and there is also ancestor veneration that is pretty common as well. Beasts in Ironsworn are like unnaturally large beasts, monstrous beasts, huge wolves, primeval, dire wolves or werebears, that kind of stuff. And in they stalk the wild areas, and so in that case, it is they're there, but they're distant. They're not roaming around all the human villages looking for someone to get. They're off in the distance waiting for people to come out. Horrors are another uh, choice, and the terrible monsters do haunt the forests and the waters and the underground. They're rare, um, but very few people are willing to just go out into the night for no good reason in dangerous areas. And some of these abominations, they are creatures who were banished from Jarnheimer, or some of them, the Gnunga Gap is what they called the primordial darkness that supposedly, the first Jotun Ymir came from and was used by the gods to create everything else. But in that darkness, man, maybe there's some other stuff that crawled out of the darkness that the old tales don't tell, and it made its way to Jotunheim. The firstborn is the word Vetir is basically, it's generic. It can mean any kind of spiritual or mysterious being. The elves, the giants are a Vetir, and so are all the little things that hide. It's just, it's a very general term. But they exist, and again, I won't go into reading all of them. I will make a couple points. Um, the firstborn, or what will generally be called the Vetir, because um, just to give it that Norse flavor. Unless I'm pronouncing everything wrong and you actually understand the language better, in which case I'm probably not making it better for you, but I'm having a good time. The giants are the Jotnar, singular Jotun, um, are not, at least in Norse mythology, they are not really like the super giants. They're not gigantic like we use the term giants. The Jotnar and the Aesir, which are the gods, they interbred. They're the same type of being, and they're being a Jotun is not about being enormous in size. Okay, now some of them could get very big, and a lot of them are shapeshifters and very powerful. But so I won't be using the term giant. It'll be giants. It'll be Jotnar or Jotun. The elves are called the Alfar, and they have the Alfar, which are dark elves, sometimes called the dwarves, and the uh, Alfar are the light elves. Yeah, I suspect I will probably just mostly stick to the Anglicization of especially words that I kind of stumble over. Um, but they have been banished here before, and they have communities set up throughout Jarnheimer. Trolls, the troll folk, the trolled folk. Basically, there's two types that are big trolls, which are kind of your big brutes. Those are your mountain trolls and your forest trolls, and then you have your cave trolls, which are smaller, more human-sized, and more crafty, intelligent, but they don't care for the sun too much. The Varu, which in Ironsworn are like wolf people, are the Varuthor. Uh, and you can you see it's like almost like a cognate. I'm not sure exactly where Varu came from, if it was just kind of made up from something like that. But Varu and versus Varuthor, um, sounds pretty cool. I like it. Um, they exist in here as well. And then the general term of Hulderfolk, the hidden people, basically refer to anything that's a nature spirit. Now, when things in the Norse, when they say they're spirit, they're not necessarily ethereal like ghosts. They're like gnomes, or they can disappear. They can remain invisible so that the big people can't see them. They can go through the trees and actually live in trees, but they're not like ghosts. A lot of them have powers and whatnot. But so when it says like spirits, Veter, it has a more physical idea to it. Of course, there's animals that are fairly, the familiar animals, all the domestic animals, bears, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so now let's see what's next. Okay, mark the background bonds. Okay, I did come up with I just kind of wrote it down, a uh, background for Knut, talking about his brothers and how that they're all dead. He is now living with his um, one of his brother's widows. He has two sons of his own, and he and she are basically common law married, and he's taking care of her son, his nephew, as well as his two sons, and they're living on a steading uh, outside of the town of what's it called? Elderwatch or Uldengevakt. Uldengevakt. All right. And so for those bonds, these NPCs, uh, and these I rolled up. I rolled the names up using the charts. Sonia is her name. Um, she's his lover, and even though they haven't been officially married or whatever, they're accepted as being a couple now. Um, and these are his two sons, Fargrim and Tjalva. They are his sons, and uh, what was? Whoops, no, I need background. There we go. Couldn't find that. Let's see. Orn. Okay, his nephew Orn. So they all live together in their steading. They have a couple servants, um, and he's at the point now where he knows he needs to start um, taking his sons out on adventures, military misadventures, if you will. Not necessarily military, but heroic things to do to get them to be able to sign up. So since we picked three bonds, I decided to make his bonds the town itself, Elder Watch, Sonia, and I basically put his two sons together to make a single bond to give the starting bonds that you're supposed to make. And as it says, these represent home, family, friends, other loyalties. Um, okay. Now the background vow. I do have, like I said, I've run through this a couple times trying to make, get used to the setup and what would look best, and making the character. And the background vow is going to come into play later. I have an idea of it, and I'll write it down at that time when the narration gets there. I know what it is, um, but you'll have to keep watching to find out. Okay, and envision your inciting incident. All right. So now we're getting to the point to where we're talking about kicking off the adventure, kicking off what starts, what's going on. So let's see. There's one other thing. Quest journeys. Oh, inventory. Okay. Um, Ironsworn is not big on keeping a detailed inventory. It doesn't break things down necessarily into discrete bonuses. It's you have a weapon and it's either lethal or non-lethal that affects uh, your progress, how much damage you do when you hit somebody. Uh, the armor is not, you're not harder to hit if you have better armor. A lot of that has to do with that it is narrative, right? And if there is somebody that you're facing, you don't necessarily have to keep track of their armor, but say they are more armored, say they're heavily armored, or they have big weapons, then you adjust uh, their uh, their threat level, and that kind of kicks that up and down. So he's got your typical warrior gear. He's got a shield. He's got a spear. He's got a sax. He's got his big sax. He probably has other weapons around, axes and whatnot, especially that, he's given some to his sons, just because of his background as a warrior. Because when in his youth, he did ride a lot into battle. He was a Viking. He hired as a mercenary. Um, in fact, he and his brother, Njal, who was Sonia's husband before he died, and he died at the same time as Canute went missing. They found his body, and Canute showed up a long time later. They were coming back from a successful campaign, so he's a warrior. He's a veteran warrior. So his items, he probably, because he was a veteran, he's probably got a helmet and he's got shields. There's a separate asset for being ironclad, and that represents someone who has like a heavier set of armor. It's one of those. It's an asset that you're supposed to purchase, but I think I would probably play it if you come across a set of armor that will work for you. I don't know that you necessarily need to have experience, spend experience points to know how to put on the armor, right? Um, so I think anyone could do that. But if the armor got destroyed, it's hard to replace and hard to fix, because with the level of technology and industry that is currently in the Yarnheimer, it's very rare. It is very valuable. Okay, so since our next step is about to kick off the journey, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, and I'll try to figure out how to, make this video look nice without without destroying it or erasing it. And I had fun. I hope you guys are having fun, and I plan on putting out some more of these videos, and I hope to see you again. All right, everyone, peace out. I'll have to find some kind of cool Viking way to say goodbye or later or something like that. But anyway, we'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching.